Hello and welcome to another video. Now, the east coast of Australia has long been a mecca for surfing and industry. It's one of the best surf destinations in the world, and from Noosa all the way down to Sydney and beyond, you're spoiled for choice in terms of waves and swell and variety. So in this edition of Quick Tips, we're going to take a look at everything you need to know for surf tripping in Eastern Australia. So the best time of year to surf in East Australia is basically any time really. I mean, it's a very consistent part of the world. There's usually something to surf. Generally the best time of year is sort of February until May. This kind of encompasses the end of summer when you get cyclone swells coming down from Fiji, and is also transitioning into winter where you get, start getting winter swells. You generally get nice winds and good conditions. So I think heading there at that time is just a really good time to guarantee waves. And then heading into winter itself, so like June, July, August, generally smaller conditions and calm, but you get these big east coast lows that light up the coast. You'll get a good run of swell every winter where, for a week or so it will just pump, which doesn't happen all the time, but it definitely can happen. The only time I'd suggest avoiding surfing on the east coast is sort of spring, so that September, October, November sort of time tends to be pretty shit. You get like a lot of wind and not really that much swell. This is where a lot of the world's most famous surf spots are. The Pass in Byron Bay, Noosa Heads, obviously in Noosa. The Gold Coast is where the Superbank is, Snapper, Kira, in that Gold Coast area, Burleigh Heads, Lennox. There's so many waves in this part of the world. Loads of other beaches and lesser known spots as well that I won't mention. Those famous right-hand points to breakwall wedges and like hollow beaches and like sheltered little beginner bays as well. So you really are spoiled for choice in this part of the world. So the distances in this part of the world are massive. You look on a map and you've got, Brisbane and Sydney sort of next to each other. But in reality, that's like a 12-hour drive. To get around, I'd recommend driving, so either hire a car or camper van. Rental, check out Discover Cars, Juicy Campers, Travelers Auto Barn. They rent out campers, which come with like the living equipment as well, which can be really handy, if you're just living that sort of camping van sort of life. And then if you're on a really tight budget or you don't drive or can't drive, you can take the Greyhound bus. This obviously isn't ideal, but I have done it before. Pretty affordable, they're quite popular with backpackers, but yeah, it's not going to give you the maximum flexibility of getting waves. You won't be able to go to like lesser known places. So I just want to interrupt this video quickly to let you know about today's sponsor. Now today's video sponsor is Stoked Surf Adventures. Now Stoked Surf Adventures have surf camps and accommodations all over the globe, including some of the top destinations from far-flung places such as Sri Lanka, Indonesia, the bottom of Africa in South Africa, Mozambique, the Maldives. They've also got some wicked ones right here in Australia. So if you're looking to head to the east coast of Australia, get waves, have somewhere wicked to stay, check out Stoked Surf Adventures. I'll leave the link down in the description where you can check them out. But for now, let's crack on with the video. So Australia is a pricey part of the world, there's no escaping it. But that's for good reason, it's because everything in Australia works. It's like a wealthy, prosperous country, and you pay for that. All the roads are good, everything works properly, you've got all the services and comforts you'll find in America and Europe. It's just a very high standard of living, so obviously that comes with the price. If you're trying to cut costs, I'd definitely recommend staying in hostels, because you can find hostels for sort of 30 AUD per night, which isn't crazy cheap compared to like Asia, but it is for Australia. Or you can camp, you can always free camp, or you can pay to go in campsites, which again aren't really cheap, but it's definitely cheaper than staying in a hotel. And then to get food, I'd recommend just cooking your own food in Australia. Restaurants are pretty expensive, so if you're eating out 2 or 3 times a day, that's definitely gonna push up the cost quite significantly. There is localism in Australia, and quite bad localism at that. These sort of lesser known spots where the waves pump, people are definitely territorial about their spots and they don't want other people visiting them particularly. So yeah, you definitely got to be careful of that, especially when you go into lesser known places as well. At like the marquee spots, your Snappers, wherever, these points, locals are dominating and getting their waves. That's just how it is and something you've basically got to accept when you're traveling in this part of the world. But on land, generally locals really laid back, really friendly. The wildlife here is abundant, you know, in the sea you've got dolphins, you've got whales, you've got turtles, stingrays. On land you've got like lizards and kangaroos, wallabies, all this incredible wildlife. You know, Australia's very famous for it. With that as well comes all like the dangerous stuff, you know, like the snakes and spiders. It's probably one of the first things you think of when you think of Australia, and they do exist. There are spiders and jellyfish and things that can kill you in Australia. But generally, you're not really experiencing that much, you know. You might see the odd spider, like a huntsman, it's like this big scary thing. But generally, like the most dangerous snakes and spiders you don't really see unless you're going out camping in the bush and stuff. While a lot of the wildlife is amazing, that does also bring sharks. And sharks, again, is something we think of when Australia and surfing comes to mind. It's a very real part of surfing in Australia. Sharks are there, and while shark attacks are still rare, even in Australia, it's sharky, especially that northern New South Wales stretch of coast. Some of the sharkiest waters in the world, you know, and the reason being is because you've got like warm water sharks like tiger sharks, bull sharks, and cooler water sharks like great whites that sort of converge on that far eastern point of Australia. From Byron Bay downwards, it's a really sharky part of the world. I know Tallows at the back of Byron Bay is notoriously sharky. Ballina just down the coast is really fucking sharky. And that's just something you got to be aware of, you know, when you're surfing in their home. For the most part, you're not going to think about it too much, but just be really careful when you're going off to lesser known places in northern New South Wales. I know there was an attack recently down in Port Macquarie. Now it's really consistent in this part of the world. There's basically always waves, as I said before. Just try and avoid the springtime because that comes with bad winds and minimal swell. In winter, you know, if you're going sort of Feb, March, April, you can expect to be surfing every day. You know, sometimes it will be small and junky, a bit grovelly, but between those days you'll get some cyclone swells, or if you're in winter you'll get these big east coast lows. So it's a very consistent part of the world, and while you might not necessarily be surfing like pumping points every single day, like the open beaches that face directly into the swell, you'll always be getting waves there, like almost no matter what. You know, it's crowded in Australia. Snapper, Byron, Noosa, they're incredibly crowded spots. You know, it's one of the first things we think of when we think of crowds is, you know, that image of Snapper with like 1,000 people out or something. It's crazy, you know, a lot of people surf in Australia. It's really popular. The waves are really good. So just be ready for that. If you're going to these like marquee spots, you're going to be surfing with other people and you'll definitely have some frustrating surfs. But if you get off the beaten track and go and find some lesser known waves, you'll be able to escape it. And as well, if you're just patient and surf all day among the crowd, you're always going to get a few waves. In terms of visas, for most countries you can get a 3-month tourist visa on arrival in Australia. You just fill out the landing card. You do need to apply for it online beforehand, but generally you just get 3 months and then you've got to leave. Australia is interesting as well because it offers a working holiday visa, which if you love Australia like I do and you want to stay there for longer, you can live and work in Australia for up to 3 years. And the way that works is you can get your first year visa basically straight up, just pay a few $100s and you get it. If you do 3 months of farm work within that year, you can then get a second year. And if you do 6 months of farm work or agricultural work in the second year, you can actually get a third year now. There's loads of other wicked stuff to do in Australia. There's a lot to take in down in Sydney. Obviously the harbour's iconic. You can head inland to the Blue Mountains, which are really cool. Wildlife parks where you can get up and close with koalas and crocodiles and kangaroos, wallabies. There's a rock pool near the Gold Coast as well. It's got like this natural slide. So you basically slide down this waterfall into this pool. It's a beautiful little environment in the forest. It's sick. So there's a lot to do in and out of the water. So, you know, if you're traveling with a partner or a group of friends, it's not just surfing. You've loads of other cool stuff to do as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's given you some tips for making an Australian East Coast surf trip happen. Any questions, please fire away down below. For now, it's goodbye from me, and I'll see you in the next episode.